Hi, I'm Tom Burke, and welcome to Public Health on the Inside. This is your inside look into the world of public health. I'm the Associate Dean for Public Health Practice here at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and through our series of podcasts, I want to take you to the front lines and introduce you to the people and the world of public health practice. The world of public health practice is filled with opportunities, and that's what we'll explore on Public Health on the Inside. Today, I want to introduce you to one of actually my good friends and a real leader in the whole field of environmental public health. She's the Associate Commissioner and Director of the Bureau of Environmental Health at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, Suzanne Condon. Those of you who know me, I always felt that I had the coolest job in the world being in charge of environmental health in the state of New Jersey. But I have to tell you, if there's a second best job in the world, it has to be environmental health in Massachusetts. Massachusetts, it's such a microcosm, really, of the whole country, with its geography, with its coastal location, with its politics, with its famous people, and with Cape Cod, and some very historical roots in public health. Suzanne has more than 30 years of experience in public health practice, and she leads a team of public health professionals, including epidemiologists, toxicologists, environmental health scientists, and physicians. And she has the daunting task, but also the amazingly challenging task of addressing everything from indoor air to emergency response to food safety, radiation control, and in summertime, the beaches. So, Suzanne, welcome to Public Health on the Inside.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be part of this program, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So let me start. So I love being a professor. Everybody knows that. But I really miss being on the front lines in the summertime because, we have those beaches. How are the things going up there in Massachusetts? How are things this summer?
The beaches have kept us busy this summer, and some of what we're starting to see with greater frequency with respect to the freshwater beaches really has to do with algal blooms. And algal blooms are something we're paying a lot more attention to because of the likely increase as a result of climate change issues, but also because some researchers have suggested that there may be certain types of algal blooms, such as cyanobacteria, that may in part play a role with certain neurologic diseases, and notably Lou Gehrig's disease. I think you know, Tom, that what we try to do in public health in Massachusetts, much the same as you did when you were formerly with that other state, is really try to blend the various disciplines so that you will not see in Massachusetts a group of epidemiologists sitting by themselves designing a study if it deals with an exposure component. They're going to have the toxicologists sitting right there with them so that we capitalize on every opportunity possible to see if there is an impact between the environment and health so that there's no opportunity for missing anything.
I think a lot of people don't understand all the science that goes into really keeping the beaches and our swimming holes safe.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that one of the things that we've done in Massachusetts, in addition to passing the Massachusetts Beaches Act, which was soon followed by the Federal Beaches Act, was to do an enormous amount of public outreach. So we have historically tested the beaches for bacterial exceedances because we've had many reports of people with gastrointestinal effects, ear, nose, and throat infections, irritations of the eyes and such. These are the types of things that we do see occur when people swim in water that does not meet minimum standards for bacteria. So the beaches are sampled on a weekly basis. They're required to be sampled at a period of time referred to as peak bathing density. So the beaches must be tested when there are a lot of people at the beach.
Aha, the old trick of monitoring when there's no one around to get good results. So you've caught on to that one. They tried it in New Jersey. And I love the way that you call it bacterial exceedances. In New Jersey, I used to call it poop in the water.
Well, yeah, Massachusetts is a small state, a dense state, but quite small in terms of geography. We're bordered just to the north by the state of New Hampshire. In late spring of this year, we were notified by New Hampshire state officials that some of the filters that they had installed in their new sewage treatment system were letting go throughout the system. And literally millions of these small, about half-dollar shaped discs contaminated with fecal matter we're headed for Massachusetts and some of the most pristine beaches that we have. I think in general people don't think about bacterial exceedances or activities such as dogs defecating on a beach, combined sewage overflow systems really being pushed beyond their limits when it rains out, and getting this kind of contamination in the water, and knowing that it can indeed result in health effects later.
Anyone who's ever worked at a local health department and on any of the coastal states, and our colleagues in California certainly know this, it's a huge part of our job, particularly in the summer. But one of the real challenges in environmental health that people are so concerned about are clusters of disease related to perhaps environmental exposures. And you have probably one of the most infamous clusters and famous, and a movie and everything else. I did clusters and never got a movie, but Woburn, certainly you have been very much involved in and had to lead a major part of that investigation as well as other things. So I wondered if you'd talk to us a little bit about the detective work you do as the environmental leader for the state.
Sure. I think I can't even ever talk about cluster investigations and detective work or environmental health in general, Tom, without going back to those early days of Woburn. Because I think much of what we've learned, not just in terms of investigative protocols for these types of epidemiologic investigations, but also risk communication, community involvement, so many important pieces. I learned because of the early days of Woburn when our department was first faced with, frankly, a couple of parents and a priest from a local parish in that community with reports that there seemed to be too many children with a diagnosis of childhood leukemia. And did the state think that that was unusual? Well, at the time, we had no cancer registry. There was no surveillance system in place. And so we looked to CDC for assistance. And CDC did provide some staff and some funding. And through that, we were able to at least go to some treatment centers for children with leukemia, because at least back in those days, and that was really the late 70s, early 80s, there was a small, finite number of groups that would have ever treated a child with leukemia. So we used these different methods to identify whether or not something indeed looked as though there was an excess. That started a whole series of investigations, but one of the most important lessons that I think we all learned in the environmental health community with respect to the early days of Woburn had to do with risk communication and keeping the community involved. Oftentimes we get caught up in the science because it is interesting. And I will say that the one promise I make to every person that comes to this office is that they will never be bored. Environmental health is not a field that one could ever really be bored with. And so in the early days of Woburn, when the Department of Public Health at the state level finished its first investigation, they released a report that didn't say a study was done and we were unable to determine if there was a connection. Rather, the report said there was no connection between exposure to contaminated drinking water and leukemia diagnosis in children. To make matters worse, that particular study was released and was published in the local paper on the very day that Jimmy Anderson's funeral took place. And for anybody that doesn't know the story of Woburn and the now famous movie and book, The Civil Action, it was Ann Anderson, Jimmy's mother, that first went to Reverend Young to say, there's something wrong here. There are too many children with leukemia, and every time I go to Massachusetts General, I see more and more of my neighbors there with their children. So that whole experience led us to believe, and me personally, that it was really important not to rely on statistics and statistical models alone, that sometimes because we're dealing with smaller numbers, we may not achieve statistical significance in terms of trying to associate an exposure with disease patterns. But it also, I think, taught us the importance of having regular communication with the community. The very people who were most impacted by any of the work that we do should have an ongoing dialogue with state or local investigators. It really doesn't make sense to leave critically important people out of your overall investigation as it relates to keeping in touch with people.
And I think that's one of the great lessons of Woburn, and through your example that CDC and the states take very seriously concerns from communities about disease clusters, and you've done tremendous work on the scientific side as well. But that's a very important role for public health practitioners.
I think that the other thing that gets to the whole idea of community involvement, and I think you may know, Tom, that I was just part of a scientific panel that updated the CDC cluster investigation guidance.
Yes.
So that should be coming out soon. But I will say that for all of the notoriety that Woburn received, both in terms of the book and the movie, it was really important that our work not necessarily be highlighted in a more significant way in the book because of the events that occurred. I made a commitment to the Woburn families that they would never again read about the results of a study so important to them and their families in the newspaper before they heard it from us first. And I think the importance of that is not something that I can stress enough, because the Woburn people have been with us for years. I still consider many of them friends. I still see them periodically, go to lunch with some of the mothers. They are the ones that are willing to stand next to us so often when we do cluster investigations that don't show something. They say quite clearly, these are people that can be trusted. If there's something to be seen, they will tell you.
Well, the daunting challenge of clusters and the challenge of credibility, and you've been a model. So one last thing, we've got to go, but I wanted to ask you, students ask all the time, what's the best way to prepare for these jobs? I think you and I know that nothing could ever prepare us for the excitement and the challenges that we faced on the front lines there, but what advice do you have for students coming up?
Well, one thing I would say, Tom, is that it always makes sense to see if, even if it's on a break, a semester break, or summer vacation, to see if the State Health Department might let you take a week of your time and come in and work on a project. See what it's like. I can tell you that right now we have 6 student interns thoroughly immersed in climate change and adaptation activities, and they're having a ball. They love it. They're getting out. They're meeting with local health officials. They're understanding the differences of climate change, how it's going to impact the western part of the state where we have rivers and dams and things like that, and the differences between that and the northeastern part of our state, which is all coastal communities and areas where, frankly, some of those roads may not be there 30 years from now. And they're just fascinated by what they're learning every day. So I would encourage students to really reach out and get some field experience, because once you catch the fever, you will stay with environmental public health.
That is true. Suzanne, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for all your contributions to the field.
Thanks, Tom, and keep up the great work, and go Hopkins.